All right, everyone. It is 11 a.m. So if you're still tuning in, make sure that you all have your videos off and your sound is muted. We'll be chatting via the chat window, as some of you have already started. So thank you for that. Hello, and welcome to our first Birding 101 webinar. We'll be focusing on beginner birding and setting the foundations for bird identification. So whether you are brand new to birding, maybe you just saw your first bird this week, or are looking for tips and tricks to help you become a better birder, or if some of you are already experienced birders and you're looking for ways to teach others about birding, I hope to cover that in this webinar today. If you have any questions that come up during the webinar, please use the chat window and we'll get to your questions as soon as possible. We are recording this webinar, so you do not need to worry about scrambling to take notes. It'll be up on our YouTube channel, hopefully in the next couple of days. I'll be sure to send out all the link to everyone that is registered. So I wanted to teach you all about bird identification today, because in these uncertain times, I know personally I have been finding a lot of comfort in watching the birds in my backyard. And luckily for us, spring migration is in full force, and we can observe it even in our own backyards or our neighborhood parks. All right, so if you're not familiar with Zoom, that is a platform we're using today. When I went full screen, your screen probably went full as well. So what you need to do in order to dock that chat window is to exit the full screen by pushing escape. And then you want to click that chat button that we have highlighted down below. Once you click that chat button right here, that should dock your chat window on the right side of your screen. And then once you have that chat window docked, make sure that you are addressing it to everyone. I want this to be a conversation with everyone. We're not going to be having any private conversations. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into that chat window and we'll get to them as soon as we can. All right, we are going to start off this webinar the same way we would start off any of our programs, by getting to know you all a little bit better. So in the chat window, I want you to type where you're from and what your favorite bird is today. Also, we would like to know how many people are attending this webinar with you. So if you're watching with your kids or your family, please also attach how many people you are watching with today. Ooh, I see someone, Jaylee really likes the cedar waxwings. Those are beautiful. Loons. Ooh, a wood duck. I know myself, today I would probably say canyon wrens. I really like canyon wrens. Great to see people from outside of Colorado. Thank you all for using the chat window. All right, feel free to keep adding to that chat window, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started with our webinar today. So thank you for telling me your favorite birds. I saw a lot of them that I really enjoy as well. And it's cool to see that people are tuning in from outside of Colorado. So that's great to see. All right, so a little bit about myself. My name is Tyler Cash. I am an environmental educator for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, and I'm gonna be the one presenting this webinar to you today. And joining us in the chat window is Chaley Jensen. She is our Nebraska Wildlife Education Coordinator. So she'll be trying her best to answer all of your questions. She'll also be adding some links to anything important in there. And she'll be the one kind of virtually talking to you all. I'll be the one talking to everyone on this presentation. All right, so a little bit about Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to conserve birds and their habitats. And we strive to do this through an integrated approach of science, education, and land stewardship. So our work radiates all across the breeding, wintering, and migratory ranges of birds. We are working from the border of Canada all the way down into Mexico. And now with these webinars, we're actually reaching people on the West and East Coast. So it's pretty exciting to see our work radiate even farther. All right, so in this webinar, we'll be learning what characteristics are specific to birds, what makes a bird different than any of the other animals. We're gonna learn why birds are important, why you all maybe signed up for this. I'm sure we have a lot of bird enthusiasts out there, but we're gonna talk a little bit more about why they're important. We're gonna be learning the steps that we use to identify birds, and we're going to also be applying these steps later on in the webinar. So if you do have a field guide handy, or you have your phone that might have a field guide on it, we will be trying to use that later on. If you do not, that's okay. Shaylee will be entering a PDF link into the chat window a little later on, and you should all be able to access that as well. So before we get started, I just wanted to tell a little bit story of myself and what actually got me into birding. So I grew up, luckily, in Southern California, where my family took me camping. I was outside as much as possible. I always noticed birds, but I never actually took the time to identify them. When I was in college, I was in an environmental interpretation course where we were outside learning about how to teach people about being outside. And I remember looking up at 2 redwood trees, and there was 2 bluebirds up there, and I could tell that they were different. And I just had no idea what they were. Later on, I figured out that one was a Steller's jay and the other was a California scrub jay. But at that time, I just had no idea, and it sparked this curiosity within me. And ever since then, I've been birding as much as possible, and it's definitely one of my passions. I haven't stopped since, and I'm really happy to share that with you. And hopefully we'll have some future birders at the end of this webinar. All right, so first off, I just want to do a little bit of brainstorming here. So I want you all to think about the last bird that you saw. Maybe you saw one this morning, maybe you're looking at one right now. Maybe you've never seen one, which I have a picture here for you. And I want you to type into the chat window, what makes a bird a bird? What makes them different than other animals? What are some characteristics that are specific to birds? See some great answers. Wings and feathers. Yep, they lay eggs. Ooh, their beaks. Thank you all for participating in the chat window. All right, I see a lot of great answers there. So yeah, a lot of you are correct. Birds, they have feathers, and feathers are something that are unique to birds. Keep them warm, it helps them fly. It also helps keep them dry. I know a lot of us wear our nice down puffy jackets in winter weather to keep us warm. Birds are warm-blooded. We like to call that endothermic. They generate their own body heat, just like us as humans. Birds also have hollow bones. That allows them to be nice and light. It helps them fly. Birds all have wings. I know there's a lot of birds out there that they don't fly at all, maybe like a penguin or an ostrich. And they use their wings for other purposes, but all birds, they do have wings. Birds, they have a tail. Their tail come in all different shapes and sizes, which we'll be talking about a little bit later today. And yeah, they also lay eggs. Birds come in all different colors. They are in all different sizes as well. So that's just a little bit about what birds are. And now we're going to come to the question of why birds? Why are we here learning about birds? Why are birds important to us? So first off, birds are very interesting and they're inspirational. I know whenever I see a bird fly by, it stops me in my tracks. even when I'm driving alongside a road, maybe driving to work, and a bird flies by, I catch myself looking at it for a brief moment, safely, of course. It's a skill that you learn as a birder, to bird and drive at the same time. Birds are also accessible. They can be found anywhere. You can see birds in cities. You can see them in your backyard. You can see birds when you're out in the middle of the desert or out hiking. They're accessible. They're everywhere, which makes them really fun to identify. Birds also act as environmental indicators. So that whole canary in a coal mine we've probably all been taught about at one point or another. Birds can tell us a lot about the health of our environment. And if we listen to them, we can hopefully help make this world more bird friendly and more healthy for all of us. All right, so as humans and scientists, we really enjoy numbers. I know myself, I like to know how many things are out there. I like to count. So in the world, there are around 10,000 different species of birds. Uh, Here in North America, where I'm sure most of you are tuning in from, there are around 1,000 species. In Colorado, where we are based at right now, there are 507 species that have been identified here. And Bar Lake State Park, that's where our headquarters are located. It's also a birding hotspot. We've identified there around 360 birds. So if you're tuning in from Colorado or even out of state, and you want to come to a great, beautiful location and identify some birds, Bar Lake State Park, it's a great place to do that. So now that we've learned a little background knowledge on birds, we're going to try to get into the nitty-gritty of it, and we're going to go through some steps that we use as birders and educators that help us identify birds. All right, so here are some steps to identifying. Again, don't scramble to take notes. This is being recorded. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to locate that bird. You won't really be able to identify a bird unless you can find it. So the first step is just trying to find a bird, whether that bird is in a tree or on the ground. You want to locate it. And then you want to try to figure out what size that bird is. And I find it helpful to compare to a bird that you already know the size of. Maybe you know how big crows are, or you know the size of a robin. So when you locate that bird, figure out the size of the bird. Is it bigger than a crow, smaller than a robin? And then when you're looking at the bird, what's that first thing that you notice about it? Maybe it's a bright yellow bird, and right when you see it, you see that bright yellow. Or maybe you see that it's soaring in the sky, and that's very noticeable to you. The next step is to observe the bird's shape. Like I said earlier, birds come in all shapes and sizes. They can be tiny as a hummingbird and get as large as California condors. So you want to observe the overall shape. And we like to start with the head and work our way down the bird. So when you're looking at the bird's head, it's really important that you look at the bird's beak. The bird's beak will tell you a lot about the bird. I'll also tell you what that bird mostly eats. So if you're looking at a bird and it has a conical beak shape, and it's really thick, that bird probably eats maybe nuts or seeds. It might be more in the sparrow family. If you see a bird that has a very skinny, a little bit longer beak, that bird probably eats insects and might belong into maybe the warbler family, and so on. You also want to look at the head. So down here we have a diagram of a lot of really cool scientific terms. For us, if we're just learning, it's really important to look at the eye. Does that bird have an eye ring around it? Is there kind of like a white circle around its eye? Are there any crowns? Does it have stripes on the top of its head? Maybe the bird that you're looking at has a crest, or I like to refer to as a cool mohawk. That's another great distinguishing feature you could see on a bird. So we're going to start with the head and work our way down. After observing the head, you then want to move to the body and the tail. Is the body, is it lighter or darker than the head? Are there any streaks or spots on the breast? Maybe there's nothing. Maybe it's just a light color. While you're looking at the body, you also want to make sure that you look at their wings. Their wings could have something that we call wing bars. That's kind of like a white or brownish color on the wings, kind of like a stripe in this diagram. Birds can also have patches of colors on their wings. So that's another field mark or distinguishing feature we want to look at. Birds' tails also come in a variety of shapes and colors. So you want to look at their tail. Is it a long tail or is it short? Is that tail rounded? It might be forked, like that picture of the barn swallow there. It might have a forked tail. So after you've gotten a good look at all of the characteristics, again, this might be happening in a span of 5 minutes. All of this might be happening while a bird's flying by. So it might be automatic to you, but it might take a little bit more time for others. So make sure you're looking at the head, the body, and the tail while you can. And then you want to observe the bird's behavior. I find bird behavior one of the most interesting things. It's fun to figure out what they're doing and maybe why they're doing that. So if you see a bird, its behavior might be on the ground searching for seeds, or you might see a bird up perched on a tree, or maybe you're going to see a bird on the side of a tree pecking at it. All those behaviors will help clue us in to what kind of bird that may be. After you've watched the bird's behavior, you want to move on to what habitat are you in? This might come automatic to you because you might be going out to a certain habitat to find a certain bird. But maybe that habitat, maybe you're in a city park, or maybe your backyard. Maybe your habitat is on a lake, or maybe you're out backpacking out in the alpine or the desert. So habitat will help you clue a lot of what kind of birds can be seen in that habitat. All right, now that we've run through some quick steps, again, sometimes you are lucky enough where you have all the time in the world and you can watch that bird. Sometimes the bird is just flying by and you're just running through all these steps as quickly as you can. All right, so once you've gotten a good look at the bird, you figured out its color, its behavior, what habitat you're in, or maybe that bird just flies away. Now's the time that we get to crack open our field guide. So a field guide, we as birders, this is something that we bring with us as much as we can. I like to think of it as a dictionary of birds. So field guides, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of them. You could use the Sibley field guide, the Kaufman, there's a Nat Geo, an Audubon field guide. They all display roughly the same information, just laid out in a different way. And I'll tell you right now, the first field guide that you learn on is probably going to be the field guide that you love the most. I personally use the Sibley field guide. It's what I learned on. It's what I feel most comfortable with. Another cool thing with technology is now that we have our smartphones and we have apps that we can download, there's a great app called Merlin that we can see down there. And Merlin app, the Bird ID app, it's a free app that you can download. And I suggest anyone, if you are a nature enthusiast, if you spend any time outside or have any interest in birds, this is a great, great tool, whether you're a beginner or advanced. I know when I'm going out hiking or maybe I'm going rock climbing, I don't always have my field guide in my back pocket, but we always have our phones on us. So downloading that Merlin app is always great because you never know when a new bird is going to fly by. So once you start looking for your birds, you want to get down to family. So the family could be either the duck, it could be a finch, a wren, maybe a sparrow. And once you get down to the family, you're then going to start looking for a match. It's also really important to read the descriptions above as well, because that's going to tell you a lot about the habitat and the bird's behavior. So once you've started narrowing down what you think that bird might be, you want to move on to your range maps. So a range map looks a lot like this. This is the range map that you would see on the Merlin Bird ID app. A range map will tell you what time of year the bird can be seen in. The range map is really important when you are learning. I know when we are teaching our kids, especially during summer camp, how to identify birds, we'll be looking at a bird and they'll open their field guides that they're just learning how to use, and they'll point to a bird and say, "This is the bird. I know it. It looks just like this bird." And I'll tell them, "Okay, so if we're looking at this range map, can it be seen in Colorado at this time?" And we'll look closely at that range map underneath the bird, and it might be white, and they'll say, "Oh, it's actually not here at all. I got to move on to the next one." So range maps, they're all going to have different colors in different field guides, but they all convey the same information. So if we look at this range map, we see in the upper top corner right up here, we see kind of a peach color. That's going to be where that bird is breeding. This is the range map of an American goldfinch. So the American goldfinch can breed up in those kind of northern states or provinces. That's the peach color. So if you're seeing that bird up there in the summer, that would tell you that it's there. Down below towards the bottom, there's a lighter blue color. That's their non-breeding range. So that's where that bird will be usually towards the winter time or late fall. And then we can see kind of in the middle of North America, you could see a purple color, and that's when the bird can be seen year round. So you can see that bird in winter, spring, fall, and summer. So range maps are really important when you're narrowing down your species. So make sure that you look at it. All right. Moving on to another thing that we as birders carry with us everywhere we go. These are binoculars. I like to think of binoculars as a birding essential. A lot of you probably know how to use binoculars, but you might not necessarily know how to teach others how to use them. As an educator for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, or some of our volunteers that are tuning in with us today, we teach a lot of children how to use binoculars with our programs, and we've probably heard everything possible about binoculars. So the first thing that you want to do, whether you're just learning to use binoculars or you're teaching someone else how to use them, is you first got to put them around your neck. I like to call it it's like a necklace or some birder bling. I know whenever we think of a birder, you probably think of someone with binoculars around their neck. So you're going to put that binocular around your neck. And if you are, whether you're inside right now or you have the opportunity to go outside, what you want to do is you want to find an object that is currently not moving. So you want to find either a tree, or maybe it's a trash can or a parked car. And once you find that object with your eyes, what you then need to do is you're going to take your binoculars and you're going to put them up to your eyes without moving your head. And that should bring the image that you're looking at right through your binoculars. And once you've done that, for one, either you might be seeing black, or it might be blurry, or you might not be able to see anything at all. So with this pair of binoculars that we have on the screen, we have something called the center hinge. And that center hinge is located right here in the middle. That's what is going to pull the binoculars apart and adjust them to our eyes. So we as humans, all of our eyes aren't just fixed in the same spot. Some of our eyes are wider, some of them are closer. So what you need to do is adjust that center hinge until you only see one picture and you no longer see black. When we're teaching our kids how to use binoculars, probably the number one thing they say is, "I see black and my binoculars are broken." We hear that a lot. And the first thing I'll do is usually tell them, well, it's probably not broken. Let's just keep on working and trying to figure it out. And eventually, once they get that center hinge down and they don't see black, they realize that our brand new binoculars, they're not actually broken. So the center hinge will help with that. So once you have that one image and you don't see any more black, you then need to focus. So on these binoculars that we have on the screen, they have this focus knob, and that knob is going to move either to the right or to the left, and that's going to make your image clear or more blurry, but hopefully we're aiming to make it more clear. And since birds are usually hopping around, it's a good idea to kind of keep your finger on that focus knob so you can keep focusing and watching that bird. One more really important thing I want to talk about when it comes to binoculars are the eyepieces right here that you're going to be looking for. So fortunately, binocular companies, people that make binoculars, they know that not everyone has the good fortune of having great eyesight. So they can actually be adjusted if you wear eyeglasses or not. So most binoculars, especially the newer ones, those eyepieces will actually twist. So they can twist up or twist down. If you're someone that needs eyeglasses in order to see, you can twist those eyepieces and make sure they are twisted down. If you do not wear eyeglasses, you can twist them so that they are up, and it might help you see a little bit better. I know for me as a birder, I do not wear glasses, and I actually keep my eyepieces down. But once you use your binoculars for a while, you'll figure out what works the best for you. All right, one more essential thing that birders or bird watchers need in order to keep a good good log of what you're seeing is a field journal. So field journals, they come in all shapes and sizes. And I put this in this presentation because keeping a field journal actually really helped me learn birds as a new birder. So a field journal can be great to keep your life list. We as birders like to keep a list of all the birds that we've seen. If you go back to that slide where we had the numbers of birds that you could see in the world, you could see a lot. So if you're just starting out birding, your life list might be 5 or 10. Or if you're a more experienced birder, you might feel really accomplished of hitting 500, or maybe you've hit 1,000 birds you've seen in your life. So a field journal is one way to keep that life list. It's also great to keep daily accounts of the birds that you see. If you're just getting into birding and you want a challenge for yourself, you can keep maybe a field notebook near a window and just write down the birds that you see. Also, field journals are great to write down your thoughts and experience. I know myself, I have a lot of different field notebooks and I keep them all. I have some from college, I have some that I use now. And every now and again, when I have some extra time on my hands, I love going back to those field journals and reading where I was at that moment. I know an experience that stands out to me. When I was in college, I was out in the Sierra Nevadas birding for a field course that I was in. And I remember I was reading my field journal. This was probably last year. And I got to a line and all I see are giant capital letters. And all it says is, a lazuli bunting with all exclamation points. A life bird for me today. And just reading that brought back my own experience of being in that sagebrush of the eastern Sierra Nevadas and that experience and the people I was with. So there are many ways to keep a field journal. Just find what works for you. Everyone can be different. You can keep a very scientific field notebook, or maybe you have one that you use more as a journal. But I think it is a great tool to bring with you and to record your experiences because it is fun to look back on. So now that we've talked about kind of the materials that we need to become bird watchers, or what'll make us successful in the field, we're gonna get to a little more interactive spot now. I see that y'all are talking in the chat window. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna actually apply those steps that we learned earlier, and we're gonna identify some common birds that we can see throughout North America. I saw that some of you are tuning in from the West Coast or the East Coast. So I wanted to choose some birds that you could almost see anywhere. All right, so this is the time that if you have a field guide with you, or if you have your Merlin ID app, I am going to challenge you. We're going to do 3 different birds and we're going to try to identify them. If you are a more experienced birder, what I like to teach our kids, because we have some kids that come to our summer camp that are really experienced, is you gotta keep that mystery. Some of us tuning in today are probably more beginner birders, and they're just learning from this. So try to help guide them along the way. If you just tell people the answers all the time, it might not actually help them remember that bird. So what I want you to do is you can crack open your field guide if you have one, or open your Bird ID app. Now I want you to try to identify this bird that I have on the screen. You can't really see the habitat that it's in, but this bird likes to be seen near marshy areas or wetland areas. So try to identify it. Maybe even put the page number. If you already know what this bird is, maybe try to figure out if it's a male or a female. And we'll give you just a little bit of time to identify them and enter that into the chat window. Nice. I see some answers in the chat window. If you know what it is, maybe try to figure out if it's a male or a female. All right. See, a lot of you have answered. This bird, it is a male red-winged blackbird. I like to always start out with this bird because, for one, you see that the bird is mostly black and it has that red on its wing. So it's really named after its appearance and what it looks like. So the red-winged blackbird, a cool fact that I actually researched the other day, is the oldest banded wild red-winged blackbird actually lived for 15 years and 9 months. So that might be older than some of you that are even attending this webinar. 15 years is a very long time for a small bird like that. All right, so we're going to use those skills and we're going to move on to our next bird. All right, this bird is a very beautiful bird, and it's in a totally different family than the bird that we saw earlier. So use those steps. And again, just like last time, if you know it, maybe let some others try to figure it out. If you do not know what it is, focus on identifying it and even challenge yourself. Is this a male or a female? This bird I know I see a lot when I go on road trips or driving out in open land. They like to be on power lines, or you see them a lot on fence posts. Yeah, I see someone's writing in that this bird has a hooked bill, which will help kind of narrow it down to a family. One thing I like to tell people too that are learning how to identify birds, we as humans like to abbreviate things, and some people might say this is maybe just a kestrel or it's just a vulture. I like to say try to use the full name. Yeah, I mean, what's the most noticeable thing that stands out to you with this bird? I know I see those dots on the chest and the stripes near its eye. Kind of looks like a football player. All right, I love all the comments in the chat window. I'm glad you all are participating. So this bird, like I saw some of you identified it already. This bird is the American kestrel. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this one. For some reason, whenever I think of this bird, it always reminds me of driving down country roads and just seeing a little bird perched on the side. And a fun little fact about the American kestrel is the kestrel is actually the smallest North American falcon that we have here. All right, and we're gonna show one more bird. This bird is in a different family than the last two. This bird likes to be in a wetland area. Usually you see it on the shore with its feet in the water. You can also see them perched up on trees when they're roosting. Again, try to run through those steps to identify. These birds are fun when you can actually hear their call. I think they sound like dinosaurs or a pterodactyl. Yeah, this bird likes to be near the wetland. It can actually be seen all throughout North America, but you cannot see them in tall mountain ranges. Like if you go up to Rocky Mountain National Park or you're high up in the Rockies, you probably won't see it. Or even out in the desert where there aren't any water, you wouldn't see them around there. But in that, you'll see them basically all throughout wetland areas in North America. I like how people are commenting on the characteristics that they notice on this bird. I like to, he's got that orange bill and that yellow eye, those long legs. All right, and this bird, this is the great blue heron. I saw a lot of you with that, the answer. I like to call them a GBH, just abbreviating the long name. Great blue herons are very beautiful birds, and they actually spend about 90% of their awake time stalking food. So I like to call these birds, they're super patient. If you ever have the luck, you're out birding and you see one stalking its prey, it's really interesting to watch. They're very patient. It's a great bird to look at and watch its behavior because they're just going to be standing there, and then at the last moment, it'll actually dive down for its food and get it as quickly as possible. I know one time I saw one go down and throw a fish in the air and then swallow it down. So these are very fun birds to watch. So now we're going to move on to a little bit of a bonus round that I put together. I know some of us attending this webinar are beginners, and some of us are a little more advanced. But I put together a little collage of some migrating birds and some birds that might be a little bit harder to identify. So here's a bonus round. I'll give you a couple minutes to try to identify them. You can look at their characteristics, maybe find the range maps where they're found. Again, we are recording this webinar, so if you don't get to all of these birds, when we post this recording, you can go back and try to challenge yourself on these birds. I like seeing the answers. This is kind of our bonus round. Some of you might know some of these, some of you might not, but again, that's okay. That's why we're learning. Feel free to even just focus in on one that you don't know and run through those steps and look at your field guide or your Merlin Bird ID app. There's some tricky ones in here. Again, looking at those characteristics that really stand out to you. And I think this is what makes birding so fun. You might feel like you kind of have a good grasp, but to become a really good birder, it takes years and years of practice. It takes a long time to actually really understand the birds in your area. And whenever you do feel like, you know, you've got all the birds in your area identified, then fall migration will come along and something new might come up that you have never seen before. So it's a game and it always keeps you on your toes. We're going to spend just a little bit more time. I see a lot of answers in the chat window, which is awesome. Thank you all for participating in that. And again, we are recording this webinar, so you will have a chance later on to go back and try to identify these as well. All right, so now that we've talked about some identification, we've talked about what you need as a birder, some tools that'll help you out to make you successful. I want to we're towards the latter end of our webinar here, and I want to talk about some simple actions that we can all do as citizens and people in our communities to help save and conserve birds. So some of you might be aware, but there is a study that we helped put out last year called the 3 billion birds, and we have lost 3 billion birds in North America since the 1970s, which, you know, we'd rather see the numbers going up, not so much going down. But that's okay, because there's what we can do to help birds. So I know the font is really small on this picture, but it is a beautiful bird calling everyone to action. So I'll just go through them real quick and tell you what they say. We're not going to go into the detail of why these are all the 7 simple actions in this webinar today. I challenge you either to do a little more research after this, or maybe we can do a whole nother webinar and kind of get into why these are some simple actions that we can do to help birds. So one of these is to drink shade-grown coffee. Shade-grown coffee allows birds to still have habitat, and without the shade-grown coffee, plantations kind of they will destroy the habitat of migrating birds. Another one of these is to use less plastic. Plastic harms a lot of people, a lot of animals, not just birds. So leaving plastic around on the streets, birds or animals will ingest that, and that's not healthy. Another one on here is to do citizen science. We didn't get into citizen science on this webinar. We hope to do maybe a citizen science webinar in the future. But citizen science is basically, you can go through on a database and enter the birds that you see, and then real scientists out there will take your observations and will apply those to their research. Another one on here is to make windows safer. Big windows, whether it's on your house or on tall buildings, they will reflect whatever they see. And that reflection might be of a tree or a bush. And I'm sure a lot of us that are attending this webinar, I'm sure you've either heard of a bird hit a window or you found the evidence of a bird hitting a window. So we want to try to make those windows safer. Another one is to keep cats indoors. I know some of us might have outdoor cats. Cats are actually one of the main leading causes to bird deaths. They are predators and they like to eat those little songbirds. So try to keep your cats indoors as much as possible. Now that we all have a little bit more time with our pets, maybe you can even train it on a leash and take it outside on a leash just to make sure that they're not harming any of the birds that are around. Another one on here is to plant native plants. So plant plants in your yard that are native to your area. That'll give birds the habitat that they need. It'll also give them some yummy food that is native, and they won't be spreading any of those invasive species. And the last one we have on here is to try to avoid using pesticides. I know we don't like to, like mouses around or rodents, we don't like those insects either around our houses. But if we use pesticides, there's something called biomagnification. And that is when a smaller animal, let's say a squirrel, ingests some poison or pesticide, and then American Kestrel might actually see that squirrel as food and ingest those poisons that are in the squirrel. So we try to tell you to avoid using those pesticides or trying to find an alternative. And all of us in our communities, we can do these 7 simple actions. And I hope we've inspired some future conservationists out there, because we want to make sure that our future, we have birds in our future. All right, and to wrap things up here, birding is a skill. It's not something you're going to get really good at overnight. It's something that can take years and years and years of practice. If you want to get better, you just got to keep on practicing. And to practice, there's many different ways that you can do that. I know a lot of us have a little bit more time on our hands. Maybe we're inside a little more during these times, or we are outside more of these times. So I'm going to give you some tricks and some tips that you could do to help you learn. So like I said earlier, the Merlin Bird ID app, it's a great one to have. It walks you through those steps that we went through earlier. It also will display birds in your area. So use your Merlin Bird ID app as much as you can. You can also practice and learn more with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They offer courses online. Some of them are paid, some of them are not. But if you want to learn more specifics about different species of birds, that's a great course to take. Another one I have is called Thayer's Birding Software. Thayer's is a great birding software that you can use. You can do quizzes on it. You can learn more about birds. I actually went on the website today, and Thayer's, they're offering free downloads to everyone. Usually they offer it just to kids or college students. But during these troubling times, he's offering a free download. So if you have the capacity to download that on your computer, I know I find myself doing those bird quizzes as much as I can, because For one, you can learn a lot about identification, and you can also learn about their songs and their calls, which we didn't get into today, but we hope to hopefully do a webinar about that in the future. Another great way to become an even more competent birder is to join a birding group. Find some like-minded people or your family. Birding is really fun to do by yourself, but it's also fun to do in a group. You can learn a lot from each other. So once we are able to go back outside and larger groups of people, I challenge you to find a birding group out there and find people that are interested in it as well, because that makes it a lot more fun. And the last thing I want to say about practicing is practicing with your field guide. I know I'm a bird nerd, and I actually look through my field guide probably way more than other people, but we can actually make a game out of a field guide as well. So if you're stuck inside with your family, or you're looking for a homeschool project to do with your family, what I like to do with our summer camp kids in particular is to hand out field guides. So we all have a field guide, and finding a bird in the field guide. So you find a bird, and as the instructor, you have to classify that bird. You have to describe what it looks like, describe its habitat, where you can find it, what time of the year you could see it, using all of those characteristics, all those steps. And then the participants have to try to find that bird in the field guide. And once they found it, they can bring it up to you, and you can tell them whether they're right or wrong. It's a really fun game to play, and you can play it with anyone. And it's also teaching them how to use their field guide and their taxonomic resource. So lastly, I want to wrap up this webinar with giving you some ways that you can keep in touch with us. We have a Facebook. On our Facebook, the Bird Conservancy Facebook, where right now we are offering daily nature challenges. So our educators are updating the Facebook daily with nature challenges that you can do in your backyard, or you can do in your park, or some of them you can even do inside. So I challenge you, if you have a little extra time during the day and you are on Facebook, to do some of those challenges and share them with us, because we love to know what people are doing out there. Also on our website, you can learn a lot more about our organization and the work that we do more specifically. You can also sign up for our bird camps during the summer on our website. And you can also look at the calendar of events. We do hope to offer more of these webinars in the future. And lastly, we have our education email. So we as the education team, we are brainstorming ways that we can impact more people during this time. So if you have any thoughts on this webinar, or you have a thought of another webinar you would love to attend, feel free to email us and let us know your ideas, because we are definitely interested in hosting more of these webinars, and we love to see the impact that we can make. So please keep in touch with us, whether it's Facebook, on the website, or email. And thank you so much for attending this webinar. I hope you all stay happy and healthy during this time. Happy birding. If you attended this webinar and you're just learning, go out and challenge yourself. Find a new bird to identify. Maybe buy a new field guide and try to figure out how to use it. I will stick around to answer any questions in the chat window. So if you feel like you need to take off, that's okay. But if you have any questions for me or for Chaylee, we're going to stick around and answer any of those questions for you. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. We really appreciate it. Yeah, if we go back to that, the bonus round, that was a house finch that I had on there as well. So for the bonus round birds, I'll answer that question. The first one on the upper left, that is a yellow warbler. Yellow warblers are are migrants that will migrate through North America and they'll stick around. The one to the right of that, that is a belted kingfisher. We see those a lot by rivers or streams. They're some of my favorite birds. I went on a walk with my dog the other day and heard one flying around near my house, which was pretty cool. The other one is an American robin, kind of the classic bird that we think about when it comes to that. The house finch is on the lower left-hand corner. Again, those can look a lot like purple finches and Cassin's finches. So really looking in detail about those and your habitat and where you're at. The hawk is a red-tailed hawk, which is probably the most common hawk that we have in North America. I like to say it's probably a red-tailed hawk unless proven otherwise. And a really great detail to look at on this is looking at those kind of those black shoulders that you see, because not all red-tailed hawks are going to have that red tail. And the duck, the waterfowl that we see on the lower right-hand corner, that is a hooded merganser, a very beautiful bird that migrates through here. There's some tips for seeing owls. Yeah, I like what Chaley has said. Yeah, getting up really early, dawn or dusk, is a great way to look at birds, especially owls. And it's great to even hear them. You can hang out at night and just put on your owl ears when you're around maybe some tall trees and try to find one. I actually saw a barn owl the other day at 4 o'clock fly overhead right over my house, and I live pretty in a city area. Didn't hear it, just saw it fly right over, and that was really cool. Yeah, I see a lot of you talking about eBird. eBird is an amazing resource in a way that you can do citizen science. If you set up an eBird account, that's a great way to keep a life list. You can also, it keeps track of all the birds that you've seen, and it's a great way to challenge yourself to try to identify as many birds as you can out in the field. I'd love to see some webinars on raptors and ducks. Yeah, I would love to do another webinar on maybe some more specific bird families. We have a lot of information out there, so we'll be sure to make note of that. Best type of binoculars to use for birding. I know I really love Vortex, or I have Eagle Optics, which Vortex owns. They no longer make Eagle Optics, but the Vortex brand, they offer of no questions asked lifetime warranty on binoculars. I've already used that warranty once and it was really smooth. So they might be a little more expensive, but they're great for beginners and intermediates and advanced birders. You can find kind of any one in that range. So yeah, Vortex, I would highly suggest if you're in the market for some binoculars. All right, looks like the questions are kind of dwindling down. Chaley, if I missed any of those questions, you can enter them in and I'll try to answer them. But feel free to sign on off. And if there's any more questions, I'll stick on here for a couple more minutes. But thank you all for sticking around. I really appreciate it. And again, for anyone that's still hanging around on here, I will be emailing out that this recorded webinar in the next couple of days. So you can watch it and review all the information that you learned today. So thank you all for attending. We really appreciate you being out here. I hope everyone is happy and healthy and safe, and good luck birding.